Hello again. In this video I aim to answer a few questions and respond to a few comments I have so far failed to answer or respond to. And this is partly my fault because for the past 2 months or so I have somewhat sequestered myself away. As most of you are aware, I have spent the past 2 years of my life living in the US. And upon returning to the UK, I discovered that my book, the original draft of my book, was far too long and contained within content that some would describe as inappropriate, explicit, or unnecessary. I can only apologise so much for the further delay, as I'm aware many of you are eagerly awaiting the birth of my book. We're all going to have to be, myself included, patient here. I was under the impression that publishing a book would not be quite so tedious. As it turns out, quite a lot of rigmarole is involved. However, I now will be subtracting or adding nothing more to this book, and it is thankfully in the hands of an editor, of a well-known publisher, of which the identity I will not yet disclose, but that is some good news. And this is in part a response to a question I've received. How can I get your boot? And I'm assuming you meant book and not boo. At least that's what I hope you meant, because the word boo is tantamount to swearing, in my opinion. So without further ado, I will proceed to address the pertinent questions and comments that I've distilled. Not that the other things I receive aren't useful, they are, and I'm ever appreciative of the feedback I get, positive and negative. The positive because I relish the compliments, and the negative because it enables me to better myself. I always strive to be clear in what I say, so thank you for giving me the opportunity. Someone states that Rain Man is an unfair and inaccurate representation of autism. It's definitely a stereotype. There's no doubt about that. But what I always found fascinating about Rain Man is that it's actually based on a real person. Kim Peek was born, raised, and sadly in 2009 passed away in Salt Lake City, Utah in the United States. Kim Peek was what they call a savant, someone who is exceptionally flawed in one or many areas and exceptionally gifted in others. He had no corpus callosum, which means his brain was making connections that a normal brain wouldn't. Kim Peek was able to scan a page in 8 to 10 seconds and retain 98% of the information that he absorbed from any book. He was able to sit on a stage, he was able to take any stage and confidently answer at a moment's notice any question that was put across to him. He would proceed to call upon his enormous arsenal of facts and information and have everyone in the audience spellbound by his sheer erudition. The reason why I find Kim Peek so pertinent and paramount is because he was the living embodiment of my notion on one's natural habitat. I'm in no way claiming that the neurology of those with PDA and autism can be completely rewired or even altered somehow. I am saying that depending on the environment in which someone with PDA or autism chooses to place themselves in will determine whether or not they are flawed or gifted. Kim Peek would be very competent on stage, but then if you watch a video of him on YouTube, you'll see that it may shoot to the next scene, which will illustrate how he is extremely uncomfortable when people stand the wrong side of him. And it's just fascinating how quickly we can move in and out of our natural habitat, which I'm not saying is a particular geographical location. It could be the activity you're engaged in, or the people you're interacting with. So yeah, that's why I find Rain Man fascinating. Someone asks, where are you in the UK? I'm in Brighton. Someone states that some kids will be able to do school eventually. I believe this is a possibility, unquote. Maybe. Every person with PDA I've ever met is an autodidact. In other words, they are self-taught individuals. From a very young age, I have been avidly into a wide range of topics. It all started with the natural world, more specifically the animal kingdom, which segued eventually into astronomy. And when I started getting really into astronomy, it just so happened that that's what school were beginning to teach me. And it was a source of great confusion for my teachers, who would observe me acting out, being disruptive or being unruly, and characteristically so in a maths lesson, followed by me being extremely alert and attentive in an astronomy lesson, and then back to being obnoxious in a French lesson, say. Now we have an inbuilt curriculum. We will ardently pursue any topic we're interested in, for as long as it takes until we have sufficient information on that subject, and then we'll move on to the next thing. And then this is separate from the school curriculum, but occasionally they intersect, and that is exactly what happened to me when I got into astronomy, and I was able to be more receptive and open to what the teacher was teaching me, because that was exactly what I wanted to learn. So someone with PDA may, coincidentally, be interested in everything at the exact same time as... They may be interested in the exact same thing school is teaching them, so the two curriculums can run parallel. And I have no doubt that a person like that would breeze and glide through the education system without incident, and that's pretty cool. Didn't happen to me, but there you go. Someone asks, what about when someone with PDA makes up intricate lies to avoid things, including things they have said themselves that they want to do? I'm not sure I entirely understand, but I'll give it a go, and I'll focus on intricate lies and avoidance. So lies echo from insecurity more than anything else. I was never a child that lied. I was an exaggerator, because I felt that if I didn't embellish everything I said, then people wouldn't accept me. And this kind of links to another question I got. What's my social life like? It's fine nowadays, because I know who I like and dislike. But when I was younger, and I didn't really know how the world worked, I felt that I was unacceptable, so I had to make an enormous amount of compromises and sacrifices. And other people would observe this, the people who were part of a group that I wished to endear myself to. They'd notice that that's where social awkwardness arises from. Social awkwardness arises from the complete absence of any kind of organic quality. So I'd say things that I wouldn't usually say that would come naturally to me, and that would be so awkward, and they could really pick up on the inauthenticity of the source of my behaviour and words. But in this context, the intricate lies to avoid things, then I'd say that your child, he or she, is telling you what you want to hear in order to shut you up somehow. Sorry to put it across so brusquely, but that's essentially what it would be. So you could say, you're going to clean your room today, aren't you? And they might say yes. They don't really mean yes, but they're saying yes because they know that that would be an effective way in forestalling your challenge. If you said no, they would challenge you. So that's what they're obviously trying to avoid. Someone wants to know what my view on medication is. It really depends. If you have a life-threatening illness, if you don't have a thyroid, if you have some kind of blood disease, if your life is at stake, by all means, medicate yourself, lest you perish. PDA and autism are not life-threatening conditions, intrinsically, which is why I'm an advocate for people finding their own place, their own environment where they can fit into. If you can't fit into school, then medication becomes it becomes a form of supplementation. In order for him to reach this grade, he's going to have to take this. In order for him to pay attention, he's going to have to take this. But naturally, without in your natural and raw state, it obviously means that being in a school environment is not for you, and that's where I disagree with medication. I was in no way prepared to dilute myself in that fashion, because, I mean, I never took any prescription medication because that's how I felt about it. I always, in my book, I use the analogy of the eclipse. It's like the moon represents the drugs, we represent the sun, and as the moon passes across, the drug moon passes across, it dims the light of the sun, and I felt diminished as a person. I knew that because I went on to self-medicate myself with alcohol, drugs, self-harming, starving myself, making myself throw up, shopping, overeating, doing all sorts of things, because I felt this dearth of meaning and purpose and substance within me. So yeah, if you're ill and your life is at stake, by all means take medication. But if you're just autistic and PDA, you probably don't need to take it. Someone asks, we live in America, where PDA is not yet an official diagnosis. Do you know anything about that process, if it's being considered? It's very interesting because, as I said earlier, I lived in the US for 2 years, and there appears to be two different discussions going on in the UK and overseas in the US. You're likely to find a professional who knows a great deal about PDA in England, or the UK I should say, but you have to search far and wide. In America, because they don't have the NHS, they're more likely to prescribe medication for a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, but it was an incredible challenge to find anyone who knew anything about PDA, and I was in 45 different states, so a discussion has been generated in America, which is wonderful. People are talking about these things, whereas they aren't necessarily in England, but you can still find a professional if you look hard enough, so it's very paradoxical almost. And someone wants to know, how can parents communicate with children in a way that does not increase demand avoidance? There's a really, really good book called The Whole Brain Child by Daniel J. Siegel, and in which he describes how connecting to your child on an emotional level is far more effective than punishing them or resorting to any kind of punitive measure. As a child, I responded bizarrely to punishment. I loved being punished. To me, it was the biggest thrill imaginable, which sounds kind of sadomasochistic, but I felt insecure if I wasn't punished enough. And the thing to understand is there's always a reason for someone's behaviour, so it's much more effective and, worthwhile to ascertain where the behaviour is coming from. And you can only really do that by connecting to the child on their level, so I'd recommend buying that book. And that's everything that's been asked so far. And as I said earlier, well, as I kind of touched on earlier, the more feedback I get, the more prolific my video uploads will be. So ask away and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you for being patient with the book. It's something I'm struggling with as well. That's it, I suppose. Thank you for watching. See ya.